There you go. There you go. Maybe you will take this advice and read that book or look that book up online and develop your own hypersocial. So let's forge a future together, a successful future together, using the power of hypersocials, using the power of the mind, and using the power of attraction. Let's see what the universe wants to give us. See you guys tomorrow. But I thought this was an interesting detail. These 5 men, they're adults. They're driving around on their own. These 5 men are on their way to a Special Olympics basketball tournament where if they won, they would win a trip to Disneyland. Just give them the trip. Just give them the trip. Like, when I read that, I was like, really? Like, you're gonna make a bunch of special needs people play super aggressive basketball because the winning team goes to Disneyland and the losing team does nothing. Like, that's a lot of stress to put on. That's a lot of stress to put on anybody. But then, you have special needs. Like, just send them to Disneyland, dude. When I read that, I'm like, that's quite heartless. To basically dangle that in front of somebody, being like, it's not super aggressive basketball. It's the Special Olympics. Shouldn't be so competitive that the losers actually lose. Like, I'm not saying everyone needs a trophy, but it's Disneyland. And then, the rest of the time I was reading the article, I kept imagining this super aggressive coach, like an old school 1970s basketball coach, throwing chairs across the gym, being like, get your head in the goddamn game. You want to go to Disneyland? Well, get the fuck out there and play. And people are like, what the fuck this is the Special Olympics. I want to see, that's the movie I want to see. The Civil War movie would be cool, but I would love to see a movie about a super aggressive basketball coach who has to coach the Special Olympics. And the joke isn't that, I just gotta say this, the joke isn't that like, haha, look at those guys playing Special Olympics. The joke is this guy is taking this way too seriously. I just can't, the rest of the time I'm reading this article, I'm thinking, this coach is like, hey, come here, give me the ball. What's your fucking problem? You wanna go to Disneyland? You like Minnie Mouse? You like Minnie Mouse? Yeah, I like Minnie Mouse. See that guy over there? Do you see him? He's gonna be balls deep in Minnie Mouse if you don't make this goddamn shot. Go back in there. That's the movie I want to see. So, I have to admit, I was quite distracted the rest of the time I was researching this, because I kept imagining this crazy basketball coach harassing them. However, we will move on as best as we can. These 5 dudes, they don't go to Disneyland. Spoiler alert. That is not what happens in this story. They are driving through California. They're up in Yuba County. They stop at a convenience store around 10 p.m. where they're sighted, buying snacks and stuff. And then... Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio Classics, where we listen to an old episode with a new outro and new intro, but the intro is just explaining what the outro is going to be. This episode was recommended by RageCat, Patreon supporter RageCat, so I really, really appreciate it. And it is a wild ride. If you have not heard this episode yet, definitely listen to it. And then if you have listened to the episode yet, just listen to it again. It's a really good episode. And then at the end of the episode, I have some thoughts about this episode to this day. This is a really interesting episode, and I'll kind of go over it. And let's get the party started. This is episode 153. You are the Yawn Machine. A Viking ship found in an unlikely location. And then we take a look at the amazing power of yawns. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Yes. Feel the relaxing power of the yawn. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. Just a quick update if you missed yesterday's episode. Today is the season finale of Dead Rabbit Radio Season 3. We're going to be taking a week off. I know it's short notice. It wasn't my original plan. I wanted to go a little bit longer because I have a vacation coming up in February, but 50 episodes is a lot. It's a 10-week work schedule. So this is where I've been taking my breaks. It feels right to take a break. I'll take a shorter break in February. I apologize, but we just got to take a break right now. So, let's go ahead and move on to our first story. Now, my little yawning exercise has gotten me a little tired, but we got a lot to talk about. The power of yawns, especially coming up. But first off, we're going back to the year 1933. That was a time warp. I don't know. It sounded like we were just spinning around and disappeared. But anyway, so we're back in the year 1933. And we are in an unusual place for this kind of story. We are in, recognize the name of that desert. We've been there a couple times. That's where the giant skeleton was walking around. That was in Arizona. I guess the desert borders like Arizona and California, because some of the stories say they're in California, some of the stories say they're in Arizona, but in this particular story, I believe we're still in Arizona. Now, there's a woman in 1933. Her name is Myrtle Botts, which was a ridiculous name even for that time period. Come on. I don't understand at what point did people think it was okay to start calling their kids Myrtle and Ethel. I mean, I'd much rather have like a Jasmine or a Bella nowadays. But Myrtle Botts was a woman. She was hiking with her husband through the Anza Borrego Desert. So this prospector shows up and he's like, I just saw something crazy. No, it wasn't an 8-foot tall skeleton with a glowing lantern in its chest. That's what my buddy saw. But I saw a boat with the head of a snake. Myrtle and her husband were like, what? It's like, yeah, I saw a huge boat with the head of a snake, and it actually had shields on the side of this boat. Now I'm going to assume this prospector isn't one of our learned prospectors that we've had run-ins with the past, but this guy, what he's obviously describing is some sort of Viking ship. At least the stereotypical depiction of a Viking ship, but he didn't call it a Viking ship. Now, Myrtle and her husband were familiar with that depiction. And, I mean, if you've seen a drawing of it, you know what they look like. So they're like, where did you see this boat? And they're trying to suss out if this guy's crazy or not. They're trying to figure out if this guy's going to, like, take a hatchet to him. And he said he saw it lodged into the side of a canyon. So now the story's getting even weirder, but Myrtle and her husband are pretty intrigued by what's going on. So they said, okay, we know where that canyon's at. It's actually Canbrake Canyon. Or can you? But anyways, I probably pronounced it wrong and that joke doesn't make any sense, but they said, okay, we'll go out and check that out. So what happened then was that they went with the prospector and they also saw the ship, and it was a Viking ship. Snakehead, shields on the side of it, and it was lodged into this canyon. They're like, that's amazing. This is the archaeological find of the decade, century probably, because we had a Viking ship on the west coast, and far predating any knowledge of Vikings being in the area. Now, at that time, they're like, well, we want to go down there and get a closer look at it, but we have to go back and get some provisions. So they pack up their stuff, they hike back to their camp, and they're like, I can't wait to get to that Viking ship tomorrow. Now, my question is that it's 1933, so I don't think they had cameras. I don't think they were carting those around. If you found a Viking ship in the middle of nowhere, like lodged into a canyon, I would want to climb on top of it. I would not like King Kong or nothing, but I would want to walk around on it. That'd be my first instinct, is like come through the canyon and then like walk around and check out the boat. But is a boat that's trapped in a canyon more or less likely to fall apart than like an old boat still floating around? I guess I just answered my question because the old boat would be all rotted, but like, would you be able to walk on a boat that had been dry docked for centuries? But she saw the boat, her husband saw the boat, the prospector saw the boat, but when they were getting ready to pack up to go back to get a closer look at it, there was a 6.4 earthquake in the area. Couldn't find the ship after that. Ship's completely gone. Now, what's interesting about that is this part of the desert actually did used to be connected to the ocean. And natives in the area, not only do they have legends of men who came on a boat with the head of a snake, but sometimes in the native population, children will be born with blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, I don't know a lot about genetics, but isn't that possible anyways? I guess not. I mean, I guess you would need to have those genes introduced into your gene pool. But the fact that sometimes natives are born with blonde hair, blue eyes, and the fact that there's old native legends of men arriving on a ship with this head of a snake. People, well, I shouldn't say people. Well, I should say people because they're people, but it's not like scientists believe this. But people think in the area that Vikings may have come there. may have come there and interacted with these tribes way, way before we ever thought there were Vikings in America, and definitely no Vikings on the West Coast. It's interesting because there is kind of a precedence for this. I mean, there's been found boats in the middle of deserts and stuff like that, but boats showing up in really odd locations, place you wouldn't ever have expected them. So, World Trade Center, for one. The World Trade Center is knocked down on September 11th by 2 planes. Try not to laugh. I was going to make a joke when I said that too. And the buildings returned to rubble. And when they started to dig up the land to build One World Trade Center, I think it's called, or One Trade Center, they had to dig deep in to get this foundation. They found a boat underneath the World Trade Center. And it was a sloop. It was a little sailing boat. Now, I had to look up what a sloop was, but a sloop is a little sailing boat. So they found the boat down underneath the World Trade Center. And nobody ever knew it was there. It was underneath all the concrete and street and plumbing and everything like that. It's only when they dug deep enough they found this sloop. This sloop was made of the same wood that Independence Hall was made out of. Like, this boat is like 300 years, well, not that old. Yeah, it'd be about 300 years old. And they had to do all these tests on it. They're like, where's this wood come from? They trace it back to this forest in the East Coast. But they're like, these other monuments were made from this same forest of wood. So they knew it was a really old boat. But they don't know how it got there. They don't know if it was just kind of sailing around the water there and got damaged and everyone was just like, screw it. And they jumped out and just left it there. Or, funnier, if someone was just like, I don't like this boat anymore, and just dropped it there to basically become like landfill. Like, they're like, we just gotta fill stuff up here. So they dropped it, threw a bunch of junk on it, eventually made part of New York. They don't know. They just know that the boat is close to 300 years old. Now that I say that, how could they not know that? Because they know, like, they'd have pretty detailed records of, like, bashing stuff around in New York to make it bigger. I know it used to be smaller, right? And then they, like, put a bunch of junk around it? Oh, man. Season 3 is ending with a bang, isn't it, guys? I also found out in my sloop-related research that there is a vehicle, a boat, known as the Sloop of War. Can you really think of a less menacing name for your vehicle? Sloop. I don't care if they'd have 100 cannons on them. How would you be afraid of anything called a sloop? Watch out, he has a sloop cannon. That's not scary. He's going to stab me with his sloop. That's not... But apparently, and I think this part's totally made up, apparently there are sightings of a ghost Viking boat sailing across the desert. I don't believe that at all. And some people think that the boat in the side of the canyon was also a ghost boat. And not everything has to be ghosts. Dude. It's just a boat. It's a boat. That's enough of a mystery. Why do you have to add ghosts to it? It's enough of a mystery. Although I do have to say it is kind of weird, you talk about like Native American curses and stuff like that. When people finally do discover this boat, there's a massive earthquake in the area. Boat's never found. And technically, the boat's still out there. They just couldn't find it again. Or they made the whole thing up. I don't know. But there's actually a lot of interesting articles about it. Let's go ahead and move on here. So, this was recommended to me in a roundabout way by Ramsey via Gmail. Now, he recommended that I do a story on Paul Adams and his food replicator, which I will, which is fascinating in and of itself. But first, I have to talk about the yawn machine. Now, Paul Adams, so thanks Ramsey for the lead, and it's the same guy, Paul Adams and his food replicator. He also has a yawn machine. He also has a robot, but we'll get to that in a second. Paul Adams is a man who is pioneering the power of yawns. But before I get into his yawn therapy, let's go ahead and take a look at him in his own words. So just to let you know, this guy is asking you to trust him implicitly on all forms of therapy, at least the yawn therapy, but he gets kind of into it. This is the guy we're going to trust here. Paul Adams, this is in his own words. I am easy to find online. I have a bunch of websites such as Yawn Guy, Paul's Robot, Paul's Robot 3, Yawn and Grow Rich, Paul's Rabbit, and more. I've looked at all of those, and it's a lot to unpack, but I also have 20,000 forum posts on related topics, dull old fart. So,